Hey everyone, hope you're all having an amazing day. Yesterday, Tu Diep stood under the burning sun of the border checkpoint, passport stamped, heart racing, ready to cross into Cambodia to save her husband. But one voice, one warning from Officer Lee, froze her in place. Don't cross. Listen to me carefully. And in that single moment, everything shifted. The man lying unconscious in the Cambodian hospital might not be James at all. So if that isn't him, then who used his name? Who sent that message? And why? Today, part 2 begins with the truth Officer Lee has been chasing. A truth dangerous enough that he begged Diep not to take one more step forward, because the real danger isn't inside the hospital. It's everything happening around it. Take a deep breath. What you're about to see will change everything you thought you knew about James, about the message, and about the people trying to keep Diep away from the border. Welcome to part 2. Let's begin. The sun scorched the border checkpoint, as if the sky itself wanted to press Diep down to her knees. The heat shimmered across the metal fencing, the lines of travelers, the dusty ground beneath her trembling feet. Diep barely registered any of it. All she could hear was Officer Lee's voice echoing through the phone, sharp, breathless, urgent. Diep, don't cross the border. Listen to me carefully. Her fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles turned white. Her breath caught in her throat, the world narrowing into a suffocating tunnel. Officer Lee, they told me someone named James was unconscious. They sent me his name. They said it was my husband. Her voice cracked like fragile glass. I know they did, Lee replied, voice thick with urgency. But Diep, listen to me. The man in that hospital is not James. Diep staggered. The line behind her shifted, but she didn't move. Couldn't move. Her heartbeat thundered. What do you mean? Lee exhaled sharply, as though he'd been running on adrenaline for hours. The man in the hospital is a cargo ship worker, he explained. A young guy. They found him unconscious after he tried to escape a smuggling group. When hospital staff checked his pockets, they found a folded paper with your home address. James's address. That single sentence hit Diep like a slap. Why would he have our address? She whispered. Because James helped him, Lee said gently. A few weeks ago, the boy said James stepped in when those smugglers cornered him, helped him get away, gave him your address and told him, if anything bad happens, go here. They will help you. The heat around Diep melted into a blur. James, helping strangers again. James, putting himself at risk again. Of course he would. So when the boy collapsed, Lee continued, the hospital assumed the address belonged to him. They reported it. That's where the rumor came from. It was a series of misunderstandings. Diep's eyes brimmed instantly. A mix of relief, confusion, and fear swirled inside her. But if that boy isn't James, then where is my husband? She choked out. Lee didn't answer immediately, and the silence made Diep's stomach twist. Finally, he said softly, Diep, James is alive, and he's already on his way back to you. Diep's hand flew to her chest as her knees nearly gave out. He's alive. Her voice wavered, breaking. Officer Lee, he's alive. He is, Lee confirmed firmly, but he's hurt. His leg is injured, not badly, but enough. Tears spilled down Diep's cheeks. Then why didn't he call? Why is he still gone? Why was there no message? Her voice trembled like a child pleading. "Because," Lee explained, "when he tried to help the cargo worker escape, something happened. They got separated. James ended up crossing through a restricted zone without meaning to. He was stopped by local authorities, questioned, held overnight. They thought he was involved with the smuggling." Diep's hand tightened over her belly, heart pounding painfully. "That's not all," Lee continued. "There was a storm, heavy rain. James's phone got water damage, completely dead. Then, because he lost his documents during all the chaos, he couldn't cross the official checkpoint. He had no choice but to walk, find help, and slowly make his way back." Diep covered her mouth, tears falling freely. No signal, no ID, no transportation, a hurt leg. He's been trying every way he can to get home. Diep felt her heart tear and heal at the same time. Of course, James would fight his way back. Of course, he would endure pain rather than let her worry. Of course, he would keep going until his body collapsed. Lee's voice softened. "Diep, go home. James is not in Cambodia. He's already heading back to your village." Diep closed her eyes, the weight of fear sliding off her shoulders like a heavy stone. Her knees wobbled, but she forced herself to stand straighter. "I'll go," she whispered. "Thank you, Officer Lee." The border gate, the harsh sun, the line of strangers, all of it faded. She turned away, clutching her small canvas bag, wiping her tears with shaking fingers. Behind her, the officer at the checkpoint called out, "Miss, you're next." But Diep didn't stop, didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Her heart had already begun the journey home. Because now she knew. James wasn't lost. He wasn't gone. He was fighting his way back to her. And Diep, with her swollen belly and aching feet, would be there waiting, no matter what. The road home stretched endlessly in front of Diep as the bus rattled toward her village. Each jolt shook her body, but she didn't care. Her hands never left her belly, as if holding her child close gave her strength. The fear that had consumed her for days had melted into something new, a trembling, powerful hope. James was alive. Every time Diep closed her eyes, she pictured him, tired, limping, drenched under the storm, still pushing forward, still coming back to her, back to their baby, back to the home they'd built with their own hands. As the bus rolled to a stop near the village entrance, Diep stepped down slowly, her legs stiff, her heart pounding. The air was warm, filled with the earthy scent of late afternoon. Familiar, comforting, safe. She didn't know it yet, but James was closer than she imagined. Miles away, James leaned heavily on a wooden walking stick a local farmer had carved for him. His shirt was torn at the shoulder. His left pant leg was rolled up, revealing a bandage someone had wrapped around his ankle the night before. He had found shelter with a small family who lived deep in the forested outskirts. They didn't speak much Vietnamese, but kindness didn't need translation. They gave him water, a warm broth, a place to rest. And when morning came, James bowed gratefully and continued limping toward home. Every step hurt. His muscles screamed. But the thought of Diep, alone, pregnant, terrified, pushed him forward like a force stronger than pain. At one point, a passing truck slowed beside him. "Hey, you're the guy from yesterday," the driver called. James blinked in surprise. "You need a ride? Hop in. You can't walk all the way like that." James climbed into the back of the truck, clutching the side panel as the engine growled to life. Dust swirled around them as they sped toward the village. His heart pounded with one thought only. Please let her be okay. Please let my wife be okay. Dip's footsteps were shaky as she reached the familiar fence of her little yard. The shadows stretched long across the dirt ground. The old guava tree rustled gently in the wind. Before she could open the gate, "Mom!" Nee came sprinting across the yard, tears already spilling down her tiny cheeks. "Mama! Mama! You're back! Grandma Huyen said you were far away." Dip knelt, arms open, and Nee crashed into her embrace. Dip buried her face in the child's hair, inhaling the scent of home. Mrs. Huyen rushed over too, her expression full of relief. "Child, thank heavens. Where did you go? Did you find James? What happened to you?" Dip tried to answer, but the words caught in her throat. I know where he is," Dip whispered. "He's coming home." Mrs. Huyen clasped her hands together in gratitude. "Oh, thank the heavens." But before they could say another word, Don barked. Once, twice, then louder, frantic, running toward the gate as if sensing something familiar. Dip's breath hitched. Her heart stuttered. She slowly turned. A dusty truck rolled to a stop in front of the house. The door opened, and a man stepped down. His clothes were dirty, wet, torn at their edges. His hair stuck to his forehead. His face was pale from exhaustion. He leaned on a wooden stick, limping, stiff. But his eyes, those soft, warm, steady eyes. "James," Dip breathed, voice breaking in half. James froze, and in that moment, all the pain in his body disappeared. "Dip," he whispered. Dip ran. Her sandals slipped. Her bag dropped to the ground. Her tears blurred everything except him. When she collided into him, James wrapped his arms around her tightly, lifting her off the ground despite the pain in his leg. "I'm sorry," he whispered shakily against her hair. "I'm so sorry I couldn't call. I tried every way to come home." Dip shook her head, sobbing into his shoulder. You're here. That's all that matters." James cupped her face, wiping her tears with his thumbs, his own eyes shining. "I would cross the whole world to get back to you." Then he knelt, slowly, painfully, and placed both hands gently over her pregnant belly. "Baby," he whispered. "Dad's home." Dip covered his hands with hers, tears spilling down her cheeks again. Nee hugged James from the side, tiny arms wrapped around his waist. James pulled her close, kissing her hair. "I missed you, little one." She sniffled. "Uncle James, don't disappear again." James's voice cracked. "I won't. I promise." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the bamboo grove, their house glowed with warmth again. No more fear. No more rumors. No more uncertainty. Just a small family, holding each other, healing together, and stepping into a new chapter with hearts fuller than ever. The nightmare had ended. Love had survived. James was home. And nothing, absolutely nothing, would take him away again. And just like that, after days of fear, rumors, and sleepless nights, the nightmare finally ended. James was home, safe, breathing, alive in Dip's arms again. No more border checkpoints, no more phone calls that made her heart drop, no more guessing, no more shadows, no more danger lurking behind every whisper. For the first time in what felt like forever, Dip could finally breathe. Really breathe. James held her close, one hand on her back, the other gently resting on the child growing inside her, as if grounding himself in the two people who mattered most. The man in the hospital, just a stranger with the same name. A terrifying coincidence that almost tore her world apart, but not anymore. Not today. Today, fate chose mercy. Today, love won. Their little home, once filled with worry, now filled with warmth again. Nee's laughter returned. Dinner felt like dinner. And the quiet moments between them felt like a brand new beginning. No more running, no more fear. Just a small family, finally safe, holding on to each other a little tighter than before, because they knew how close they came to losing everything. Thank you for watching this journey to the very end. Your support means more than words can say. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe and stay with us as James and Diep step into this peaceful, brighter chapter of their lives. For now, we close this book with gratitude, relief, and a love story that survived the storm.